Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Israel's ground invasion of Lebanon has begun. So the Israeli military announced early Tuesday morning that its ground invasion of Lebanon has started, confirming earlier reports that said IDF soldiers were operating on the ground inside Lebanon. So the IDF said that its troops are conducting limited, localized, and targeted ground raids against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon as Israeli airstrikes continue across the country. The ground raid comes after a week of heavy Israeli airstrikes that have killed over 1,000 Lebanese, including many civilians. While the Biden administration has claimed that it wants a ceasefire in Lebanon, it is supportive of the Israeli invasion and said that it was informed of the plan ahead of time. A U.S. official told the Times of Israel that the administration has accepted Israel's goal of removing Hezbollah positions from near its northern border, but is concerned Israeli forces could get bogged down in Lebanon. And they're really playing up this idea that it's a limited incursion, a limited, they're not even really calling it an invasion, but this is ground operations on the ground. Israeli troops have entered Lebanon. That is an invasion. And I'm sure this is just going to escalate from here. And there are some U.S. officials who are unhappy with President Biden's backing for Israel's escalations. And a few of them talked to HuffPost. This is U.S. officials speaking anonymously. I'm not sure what level they're at, but I know HuffPost has had a lot of sources from within the administration who have been against. There's been a lot of dissent from within the administration. We've seen a lot of dissent letters. We've seen a lot of officials resign over Biden's support for the slaughter in Gaza. So it looks like there's also some people unhappy with his support for these Israeli escalations in Lebanon. One of these officials told HuffPost that the U.S. was permitting, quote, a nihilistic regional murder spree, end quote. A second U.S. official speaking to HuffPost was asked about the claim that the ground invasion will be limited and said, quote, it will be big. Everyone who says it's going to be limited is a white man who thinks 1 million dead brown people is limited, end quote. So while Hezbollah has been hit hard and its leadership has been decimated, the group says it's ready to fight invading Israeli troops. Hezbollah's deputy Sheikh Naim Qassem, he released a video message on Monday, and he said, quote, we are quite ready. If the Israelis want a ground incursion, the resistance forces are ready for that. Israel's committing massacres in all areas of Lebanon until there is no house left without traces of Israeli aggression in it. Israel attacks civilians, ambulances, children, and the elderly. It does not fight fighters, but rather commits massacres, end quote. He also took aim at the U.S., calling it, quote, a partner with Israel through unlimited military support culturally, politically, financially, end quote. The U.S. officials speaking to HuffPost said that it was extremely unlikely that President Biden would veto Israel's invasion of Lebanon by leveraging military aid, and the U.S. is really the only actor that could stop this if they wanted to. And to stop it, they would just need to cut off military aid to the Israelis. And this is something presidents have done in the past, threatened to do that to stop Israeli escalations, but Biden does not seem willing, nor does any high-level officials in his administration. They all seem to be totally on board with this, even though they say publicly, oh, we want a ceasefire, we're working toward a diplomatic solution. But then they give them another $8 billion in military aid, and it just, no matter what Israel does, they are supporting it. The next one here, Israeli strikes on Lebanon kill at least 95 in one day. So Lebanon's health ministry has reported that Israeli strikes across Lebanon on Monday killed at least 95 people. So the health ministry wrote this on X early Tuesday morning. It was just right after midnight Lebanon time when they put this out, and said, quote, the Israeli enemy's raids in the past 24 hours on towns and villages in southern Lebanon, Bekaa, Baalbek, and the capital Beirut resulted in a total death toll of 95 people and 172 injuries, end quote. So again, Israel's killed over 100,000 people. Sorry, I just said 100,000. We're talking about Lebanon. They've killed over 1,000 people in Lebanon just over the past week. Many civilians have been killed. The health ministry said that nearly a quarter of the dead, a quarter of that 1,000, is women and children. Reuters reported on Monday that an Israeli airstrike on September 25th hit two houses in Maisra, a village north of Beirut, up in the mountains, far from the Israeli border, and displaced families gathered in this house because this village has never been attacked by Israel in previous wars. They thought it would be a safe place. But on September 25th, Israeli bombs struck two houses that were next to each other, killing 16 people, including 14 women and children. 30 people were wounded in the strike, about half of them children. Local officials told Reuters that one house was the residence of a Hezbollah fighter who was killed in battle in August, and a former fighter who had lost a leg in battle was there at the time, but there was no active combatants were present at this house. It was just civilians, and all these women and children were slaughtered. Residential homes were Israel's primary target when the escalation began last week. So this seems to be, I think this has been a common occurrence across Lebanon, this destruction of houses like this. All right, so the next one here, Israeli settler group advertises new properties in southern Lebanon. So this article's from Middle East Eye. An Israeli settler group is promoting new properties for sale in southern Lebanon as the Israeli army wages a bombing campaign in the country that has killed over 1,000 people since mid-September. Uri Tzazfon, or the Movement for Settlement in Southern Lebanon's website, boasts spacious, light-filled apartments overlooking a swimming pool with offers starting at 300,000 shekels, which is $80,000. The advertisement reads, quote, after the elimination of the Hezbollah leadership, do you also dream of a big house, a view of snowy mountains, and a warm community in the land of our ancestors? End quote. The extremist settler group emerged in March as a fringe movement to push for the settlement of southern Lebanon, which it said would bring true stability to northern Israel and enable the country to reclaim its biblical borders. The group initially started with a few hundred members. Since then, its numbers have swelled, with WhatsApp forums reportedly garnering around 3,000 members. A statement on its website claims the settlement of southern Lebanon is necessary for Israeli security. So we have seen there are these settler groups that really do just want to keep expanding, whether it be in southern Lebanon, of course, the West Bank and Gaza, but, they got their eyes on Egypt and, the Sinai Peninsula and all sorts of places. All right, so I want to mention our sponsor for today's show. That is the Expat Money Summit, and this is coming up next week. I can't believe it's October. So this is next week, October 7th to the 11th. This is the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online. From October 7th to the 11th, put on by Mikkel Thorpe, the host of the Expat Money Show, long sought after expat consultant and expert. And it is at this summit you will learn why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. Learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect plan B, meaning learn what countries where it's easy to get a passport or where they're welcoming of expats. And also you could learn how to diversify your finances offshore. And there's going to be a lot of geopolitics, a lot of foreign policy stuff, since that is very important for people who live in other countries or want to move around the world. Headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo, and many others. To get your free ticket, go to expatmoneysummit.com, or if you want a VIP ticket, which gives you access to VIP panels, including one that I'll be doing on the risk of World War III, click the link in the description, or if you go through the website, put in the code anti-war. So again, the website is expatmoneysummit.com, where you could get your free ticket or purchase your VIP ticket. All right, get back into the news here. the next story, the U.S. sends a few thousand troops to defend Israel. So the Pentagon said Monday that the U.S. is sending a few thousand additional troops to the Middle East to bolster security and to prepare to defend Israel if needed. This is what they said the reason for the deployment was. And this deployment will include squadrons of F-15, F-16, F-22, and A-10 fighter jets and the personnel needed to support them. The squadrons were initially set to deploy to the Middle East so that other fighter jets could rotate out, but now they will all stay to increase U.S. air power in the region. The day before the announcement, President Biden was asked if he would be sending more troops to the Middle East, and he replied no. So you had the president, I don't need to say this, but he's not been looking good lately, Biden. In the last few days, he just seems like kind of even more out of it than usual. But he was asked by a reporter, are you going to send more troops to the Middle East? He said no. The next day, the Pentagon announces that they're sending more troops there. And this deployment comes after the Israeli killing of Hassan Nasrallah and the Israeli slaughter of hundreds of Lebanese civilians since Israel escalated in Lebanon. So, of course, as I've been talking about, the U.S. support for Israel's attacks on Lebanon could provoke attacks on U.S. forces in the region, or the U.S. could directly intervene to defend Israel. The Pentagon is saying that, we're ready to defend them like we did back in April when Iran launched those drones and missiles at Israel in response to the Israeli bombing of the consulate. So on Sunday, the Pentagon also announced, as I covered yesterday, that Lloyd Austin ordered aircraft carrier strike group and an amphibious assault group to stay in the region to keep these forces bolstered. So they're ready to intervene and defend Israel. I saw this going around on Twitter that the Tennessee National Guard just sent troops to Kuwait, just sent National Guard, 700 National Guard soldiers to Kuwait. And look what just happened in Tennessee, the hurricane. That's something I meant to mention yesterday. I hope if anybody listens to the show, if you're in those areas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, I know South Carolina was hit pretty bad too. I hope, you guys are okay. It's horrific. Over 130 people dead now. And I know Asheville, North Carolina, a really beautiful part of the country, was like almost completely destroyed. And I think the death toll there is over 30 and they expect it to rise because they haven't gotten to everybody yet. So just really horrible. And, this is what our government is focused on now, is sending troops to the Middle East to defend Israel after it, did all these crazy escalations. All right, so the next one here, Netanyahu says Iran regime change will happen a lot sooner than people think. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a warning to Iran on Monday, saying regime change will happen in the country a lot sooner than people think. And he made this threat in a video that he posted on X and said that the message was to the Iranian people. So he posted it on a social media platform that I believe is restricted in Iran, and it was in English with English subtitles, but apparently this is a message to the people of Iran. He said, quote, "When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace," end quote. So Netanyahu said that Iran's puppets were being eliminated and warned that there's nowhere in the Middle East that Israel cannot reach. He said, quote, "With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss," end quote. So this warning comes amid all these escalations in Israel, in Lebanon, and around the region. And a member of the IRGC, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was killed alongside Nasrallah. Iran said that it would respond. I don't know if we're going to see really anything directly from Iran right now. It seems like Netanyahu is kind of itching for a reason to escalate. And, considering that they killed the Hamas's political chief in Tehran, I'm sure that the leadership in Iran is worried about what Israel could potentially do to them. It makes you think about Ebrahim Raisi, the Iranian president, who died in a helicopter crash recently. The Iranian state said that it was an accident, wasn't an assassination or anything, but You've seen all these sabotage attacks from Israel with the walkie-talkies, the pagers, killing Haniyeh. He was at a guest house in Tehran, heavily guarded by the IRGC, and they got him in his bedroom there. So, it does go to show that they have a long reach. But Netanyahu does just seem eager. There's a story, we have it at the lower part of the page, I think from Al Jazeera, saying that there's like Netanyahu and people close to him are like almost high right now because they're taking out Hezbollah leaders. They're killing so many people, and this is really growing the domestic support for Israel. So again, he seems eager to escalate. He knows the U.S. is behind him, that he could basically do anything he wants. So he's a very dangerous man right now, and so is the state of Israel, of course. All right, so the next one here, Yemen's Houthis shoot down another U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone. So the Houthis said Monday that their forces shot down another U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone while it was operating over Yemen. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sarria said, quote, "The air defenses of the Yemeni armed forces shot down an American MQ-9 aircraft while it was carrying out hostile missions in the airspace of Sadr Governorate," end quote. Sarria said the downing marked the 11th U.S. MQ-9 drone that the Houthis have shot down over Yemen since last year. U.S. officials confirmed to CNN that the drone was shot down. And the Pentagon has previously said the number of MQ-9s the Houthis say they downed is not accurate. I believe that was the last time they shot one down. It was the 10th one. And the Pentagon said, yeah, we lost a drone, but that number isn't right. It's too high. And then the reporter asked, okay, so how many drones has the U.S. lost to the Houthis? And he wouldn't say. And these aren't little, these are MQ-9 Reaper drones. These are big, powerful drones that carry missiles, that carry out drone strikes, that carry out surveillance. They're worth about $30 million a pop. And the Houthis have said that they've downed 11. So that is quite a bit. And the Houthis downed the drone after Israel launched airstrikes against the Yemeni port of Hodeidah, damaging infrastructure and killing about 5 people. Israel said the strikes were a response to the Houthis firing ballistic missiles at Tel Aviv. You see a picture here. This is the power plant that they targeted that was destroyed by Israeli strikes. So Sarria said on Monday, quote, "The Israeli enemy with American support launched 17 airstrikes on various civilian facilities in Hodeidah, including the port and the power station, which led to the martyrdom of 5 citizens and the injury of 57 as a final tally," end quote. He added that the Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, would escalate their attacks on Israel. He said, quote, "The crime of aggression against Hodeidah will be met with a military escalation against this criminal enemy in the coming period," end quote. And we know airstrikes have not deterred the Houthis from, launching these attacks, whether firing missiles at Israel or attacking shipping in the region. And this all started in response to the U.S.-backed Israeli slaughter in Gaza, this genocidal war that's almost, it's coming up on a year of this thing. And the Houthis have said that they would stop the attacks if there were ceasefire in Gaza. That was something Hezbollah said as well. But Biden chose to just give Israel everything that it wants instead. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills another 20 Palestinians in Gaza. So Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli forces killed at least 20 Palestinians and wounded 108 in the previous 24-hour period. The latest violence brings the ministry's death toll to 41,615 and the number of wounded to 96,359. And the ministry's numbers are an undercount since they only include the dead and wounded who arrive at hospitals and morgues. They don't account for the estimated 10,000 Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble. And we don't know the number of indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege. But look at these pictures here. I mean, this is the aftermath of a strike at the Nuseirat refugee camp on Monday. Building totally decimated. And another picture here, you see just the city. This is Khan Yunis, just how the whole city is completely destroyed. And one of the Israeli strikes on Monday hit a home in Deir al-Bala and killed Wafa Aludayani, and she was a well-known English-speaking reporter. She worked with the Palestine Chronicle, That's Ramsey Baroud's outlet, and we run columns from Ramsey all the time. And she was killed along with her husband and their 2 children. And Gaza's media office said that she was the 174th journalist to be killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. The media office said in a statement, quote, "We condemn in the strongest terms the Israeli occupation's targeted assassination of Palestinian journalists," end quote. Palestinian health officials told Reuters that an Israeli airstrike hit a house in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least 6 people. Strikes were also reported in the southern city of Rafah. So again, much less attention on what's happening in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Biden approves $567 million in military aid for Taiwan. So on Sunday, the White House released a brief memo stating that President Biden approved $567 million in new military aid for Taiwan, a move that has angered China, of course. The memo said Biden authorized Secretary of State Antony Blinken to, quote, direct the drawdown of up to $567 million in defense articles and services of the Defense Department and military education and training to provide assistance to Taiwan, end quote. The memo offered no details on what types of weapons would be sent to Taiwan. Earlier in September, a U.S. official told Defense News that the military aid package for Taiwan was set to be approved and said that it would fund training, stockpiles, anti-armor weapons, air defense, and multi-domain awareness, but they would not be more specific, so they're not saying what kind of weapons they're sending to Taiwan. And the military aid is being provided through the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the president to ship weapons directly from U.S. military stockpiles. Congress has authorized the provision of $1 billion in this type of military aid to Taiwan each year. That's a new thing that they include in the NDAA, the annual military spending bill. The Pentagon apparently was reluctant to use it because they didn't have the money to replenish those weapons. But when Biden signed that $95 billion foreign military aid bill back in April, there was money included in that to replenish weapons sent to Taiwan. So this is a big deal. I don't think it gets nearly as much attention as it deserves, the fact that the U.S. began providing military aid to Taiwan last year. And if when you say that, people always say, oh, the U.S. has always sold weapons to Taiwan, but we're not talking about selling them weapons. The U.S. is providing them the weapons either free of charge or they're financing the purchase of new weapons. This happens as all these tensions between the U.S. and China. And what has China been telling the U.S. like over and over again in the last few years? Taiwan's our red line. They call it the first red line that must not be crossed. They're not saying, don't give them military aid. They're saying stop selling them weapons. That's what China wants. Of course, that's what they've always wanted. But in recent years, the tensions have significantly increased over Taiwan. And China has been very clear how they view this military aid as a totally unacceptable escalation. And then you see the U.S. does all these talks with China, but nothing ever really gets resolved. And again, whenever they do the talks, they say Taiwan, Taiwan, Taiwan. Taiwan's the big thing. But the U.S. is ignoring China's red lines on Taiwan. And we've seen how things like this, where they could go. You look at Ukraine and Russia. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry denounced the new military aid for Taiwan. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Zhan said, quote, "This once again shows that the separatist moves for Taiwan independence and connivance and support for such moves from U.S.-led external forces are the biggest threat facing cross-strait peace and stability and cause the greatest disruption to the real status quo in the Taiwan Strait. We urge the U.S. to earnestly abide by the One China principle and the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques and stop arming Taiwan in any form. No matter how many weapons the U.S. provides to the Taiwan region, it will never weaken our firm will in opposing Taiwan independence and safeguarding China's national sovereignty and territorial integrity," end quote. So you see how serious China takes this. All right, so the last story here, the West to finalize frozen Russian funds for the Ukraine war. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So the group of seven, the G7 nations, are looking to finalize a $50 billion loan to Ukraine that will be repaid using frozen Russian funds. Using Moscow's money to pay for Kiev's war effort will be a major escalation in the economic war that Washington is leading against Russia. So European Commission Executive President Valdis Dombrovskis explained, quote, "The G7 presidency is now aiming for a political commitment on participation in this loans initiative around the end of October, which would allow all G7 lenders sufficient time to operationalize loans by the end of the year," end quote. So what this is going to do is give Ukraine $50 billion. They're going to loan Ukraine $50 billion, but it's not really a loan to Ukraine. They're basically just taking out a loan, and then they're going to repay it with the frozen Russian assets. So this is a huge amount of money that they will be stealing from Russia. One thing that this really does, is it really sets back any chances of a diplomatic solution of kind of just a repairing of relations between Russia and the West, because Russia is going to want this money back as part of any deal or just lifting of sanctions. And this is something that I know that some of the financial institutions are worried that they're going to face legal action in the future from Russia if sanctions get lifted over this. So it really sets things back, and it goes to show how committed they are to funding this proxy war, just dumping as much money as they can in there and from wherever they can possibly get it. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ted Snyder: Ukraine should rush back to Istanbul. One from James W. Carden: Rand's grand plan. One from Jack O'Doherty: is America buying nuclear weapons to win a war or to prevent one? One from Joseph Solis Mullen: the case for pessimism in Sino-American relations. And unfortunately, I agree and am pretty pessimistic about the future between the U.S. and China. Our spotlight is from Robert Wright and Connor Eccles: why do Biden and Blinken act like Israel's lawyers? So please go check all of that out. Support this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, share, comment, subscribe. All that stuff helps out. Follow us on Instagram and X. Again, if anybody's listening, you're in any of those areas, I hope you're doing all right. It's a real tragedy what's happened. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.